today we are going to be talking all about my sewing machine. So one of the questions I get asked the most from the IRL people in my life is that they want to get into sewing, but they either don't have a sewing machine or they do have one and they don't know how to use it. So this video is going to be kind of like a 2-for-1. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my sewing machine, what I like and dislike about it, as well as sort of go through sort of the basics I think you should know when you get your first sewing machine. So one thing I really want to stress is that I want to help you guys find a machine that is both durable as well as affordable. For me, I don't think you need to spend a lot of money on any sewing machine, especially if you're just starting out. I think that sewing in general is a lot more about technique versus the hardware. You can kind of do anything on a very basic machine, so I don't think you need to go all out and buy like a $500, $600 machine for your first sewing machine, especially if you're just a beginner. Down the line, if you want to, you can buy a serger or an embroidery machine, but I think a really basic standard model is a great way to go. For reference, my sewing machine is a Singer Simple 2263. I think this is an older model, kind of one that has a similar shape is the Singer 3232. This sewing machine was a little under $100 now, and given the cost per use that I've had of it, it is a really great bargain. This sewing machine is so incredibly sturdy. I have had it for 10 years and it's never broken down on me, and I've never had to take it in to get serviced. I also have barely ever cleaned it, which is kind of disgusting how infrequently I've cleaned it, and it still runs exactly like it did when it was brand new. I think really any of these standard Singer Simple or like entry-level models by Singer are probably a good buy if you can't get this one in particular. Some features that this sewing machine has: it has 23 stitches, a 4-step buttonhole, as well as a buttonhole foot. It also has a removable arm piece if you want to do like more tighter openings, and this piece that comes off both reveals the bobbin casing as well as acts as like a little box that I use to hold all my extra bobbins and needles, as well as all like the maintenance items that came with my machine. One thing I will say about my machine, and it's kind of a negative, but I'm also sort of like indifferent to it, is that my machine is not necessarily very fast. I know that there are people that sort of rate their machine based on how many stitches can be done in a minute, but for me, I am much more of a slow and steady wins the race kind of person when it comes to sewing, so I am perfectly fine with it not being super fast. One thing that I will say that I actively do dislike about my machine, which you can't see from this view, but on this needle plate, there aren't any measurement markings on the seam allowance lines, so it's just a little bit more annoying when you're sewing and you have to try and calculate what your seam allowance should be. Okay, so that's a little bit about my sewing machine in particular, but talking about sewing machines in general, my biggest piece of advice is that you should watch the instructional videos that come with your machine. This kind of seems like a no-brainer, but it's honestly incredibly helpful. My machine came with like a DVD that had sort of all the basic steps of how to set up my machine, and one thing that's really great about these is they're usually like targeted for your machine specifically, so if you're a beginner, it's really handy to be able to see every step of the way in first setting up your machine. Sewing machines have so many little parts that if something gets misaligned, it can really quickly mess up your whole machine. So in watching these instructional videos, you sort of get to learn the proper methodology, and then from there you'll be able to recognize any problems and sort of correct any mishaps that happen in the future. So now I wanted to do some demos using my machine as an example of just kind of like the basic steps from threading the machine to how to properly put in the bobbin casing, as well as how to clean your machine, which is something that you should get into the habit of doing. Do as I say and not as I do, and clean your machine at least once a year. Okay, so let's talk about how we get our bobbin into our bobbin casing. I'm going to show you probably my biggest tip. First of all, I always have the piece that was on the top, sort of where I was pulling the thread through, go on the outside so that the thread is coming off of the spool like this. And then I have it go into this casing like that, and then you wrap it up and around this little metal flap piece. And I would say the most important thing you have to do, if I can come a little bit closer, is you want to make sure that your thread is sitting in between this upper flap and this lower one. So it's kind of in between the two right there. I will say that if it doesn't look like this, the most likely problem that will happen with your machine is that the top stitch will look perfectly fine, but the underside will be really disgusting and all bunched up. But just making sure that your bobbin casing is threaded correctly like this will prevent any like bunching to happen on the lower thread. I think what this is supposed to do is kind of like evenly dispense the bottom thread coming out, because it's kind of like locked in there somewhat, but I don't really know that much about like sewing machine science, but I just know from experience of a lot of times of having bunchy thread, especially when I first started out, that this is the correct sort of formation you need to have your bobbin in. And then from here we can put it inside the case itself. In this guy, all I need to make sure I'm doing is, when I first stick it in, you can't have this guy kind of like flopping back and forth. My machine actually has a little sort of divot up in the top here where the little like extending arm locks in so that it doesn't fall back and forth. If you like put it in at a weird angle like over here and it's flopping back and forth, then it has not locked itself in, and it also will not look right when you start sewing. So make sure that you have your bobbin pushed all the way in and locked into like the upper section. Now we can go ahead and thread my machine. So I have my top thread coming up here with the little spool holder intact, and I basically just wrap it around this little piece right over here. Go down and then make sure the needle is in the upright position so this little notch is like sticking out, and as I wrap it around the notch, it will automatically sort of hook into this little hole that's up here. Then I pull it down and I can thread it into the eye of the needle, which I usually put the presser foot down so I can see it better. I'm pretty good at just going at it with one try. There is an automatic threader back over here, but I feel like it's gotten like misaligned over the course of the 10 years that I've had this machine, so it doesn't really work, and I'm fine with doing it just by hand, so I don't even bother with that. But I will say this machine does have an automatic threader if that is something that you would like help with. Now I can take this thread, and as I'm holding this thread with my 2 fingers over here, I'm also going to start turning the needle, and I'm going to pull slightly as the needle goes down, and that will catch the lower thread below. So I can just take a like scissor or something and pull out the bottom thread like magic. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get into cleaning our machine. First thing I'm going to do to get it out of here is to take out the needle, just because when I remove this plate it's going to be a little annoying to get in there. I'm also going to take off the presser foot so that I have good access in there, and take out my bobbin casing. So now I'm left with my internal bobbin area in here, as you guys can see, and it is a little bit of dirt and dust, which I can just, start to gather up and brush out with the brush that my thing comes with. And now I'm going to remove the casing itself, and there's these 2 black tabs on either side. So if you push them off to the side, then slowly you can pull out the casing, and on the top there is a very thick layer of dust, which is so lovely. Take both of those out, and with our condensed air, I'm going to blast this down in here. As you can see, there's a piece when I turn the needle that turns back there, and I'm going to put some oil right on the very back, like centermost piece of the hinge. So I've got my oil over here, and I'm just going to insert him and very lightly squirt some oil out. And I'm going to turn this back and forth to get it nice and lubricated back there. And I have it nice and lubricated. I'm just going to stick my piece of scrap fabric and kind of rub that up at different points along the joint, just to make sure that I'm getting out all of the excess oil. And as you can see, this is stained a little bit now from the oil, because I put a little bit more than necessary, but it's better to have a little more that you can then take away than too little, and then it's obviously not doing anything to help yourself. Okay, now I'm going to take off my top plate, and I'm going to do that using this little doodad screwdriver that my sewing machine came with. So I'm going to undo these guys. I can lift off this foot, and It's not too bad. It is a little dusty up in this area, but nothing that we cannot fix. And then I'll hit it from the top with some of my condensed air. We can go ahead and basically reassemble this. You can't see on the ground right here, but there is quite a lot of chunks of dust that flew out as I sprayed it. So I would say this is a pretty successful cleaning. Even if it was not too drastic, it definitely, every little bit helps. So I'm glad that I took the time to take care of it today with you guys. These screws I don't usually tighten too much. I just try to get them in enough with my hands and then do a couple more turns with the like middle mini screwdriver, just because I don't want them to get stripped down. And as you can see, not having the needle here gives me a lot more freedom to move around my hands as I deal with this plate. Now, putting back in the bobbin casing, we have to just align him up, remembering which part goes on which side. You'll know which one this is because there's these two side grooves that are what fits into there. And then this guy kind of just like hovers behind in the back. But it's still going to be a little finicky getting it in the right placement. Okay. It took me a little bit of fiddling around, but I got him in there. It just has to eventually squirm enough times and you will feel it sort of like lock into the ideal position. So now I have it all set up, I can go ahead and rethread both my bobbin and my top thread, fix up this area, and we're pretty much good to go. Okay, so besides like thread and fabric, there isn't that much else you need in first getting started with sewing, but I do have a couple like additional pieces that I have picked up down the line that I think could be helpful. So one item I would like to talk about is getting additional needles. There is nothing more terrifying than having a needle snap on you when you're in the middle of sewing, but I think my machine actually came with extra needles, so I didn't have to immediately, you know, like run out to Joann's to get more. But in terms of specialty needles, I would say you should get at least heavy-duty needles to handle like lots and lots of layers of fabric, as well as ballpoint needles like these, which are used for doing stretch fabrics. Okay, so clearly with these all in their package, I have used them very much, but these are all additional presser foots to switch out with your machine. I think I got these all on sale from Joann's, which is why I have so many. These all do very, very specific tasks usually, but if you're looking for something more general that you're going to get a lot of use out, I would say that the open toe foot is a good one to go for, especially because I think that the basic foot that your machine comes with, it can be a little bit like inflexible in terms of seeing what you're able to do. So having a much like wider open area is really great for having a little bit more flexibility. Another one, if you are doing garments, pretty much at all, you are going to come in contact with the zipper, and sewing a zipper with a regular sewing like machine foot is really, really annoying. So a zipper foot is definitely a lifesaver. So that is all for me today. I hope this video was helpful for you guys and was really informative, and hopefully will become a good reference for you if you are getting into sewing. If you guys would like to see more beginner sewing tutorials, please like this video and let me know down below. I hope you guys have an amazing day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!